Hello, friends. I hope you're out wandering through nature, exploring the natural world around you. Do you enjoy writing about your wanderings? Nature journaling is an awesome, fun way to remember all the adventures you have taken and how you felt during those journeys. If you're looking for some beautiful journals to keep track of all your wanderings, I have several available on Amazon, including some guided journals for children. Start your journey in journaling by clicking on the link in the show notes. Keep exploring the nature around you and keep journaling all your wanderings. Hey friends, Paul here. Welcome to the new year. I hope everyone's having a great 2025 so far. I know it's just the start, so it's hard to tell, but I've already been having a good time. This has been a great past couple of weeks, doing a lot of birding. Matter of fact, last Sunday was National Bird Day, and I spent it watching the birds, just enjoying a hike out in nature and watching the birds. And before that, last week, I did the Christmas bird count. I actually did kind of two, and I say kind of two because there is the official Christmas bird count, which is basically represented by, or put together, I should say, by the National Audubon Society. Plus, there's some co-sponsors of it. They're the main group that organizes the Christmas bird count. But some other places have kind of non-official Christmas bird counts. So a couple Saturdays ago, that was the Christmas bird count that I do, which is the East Aurora Hamburg Christmas bird count, which is part of the Buffalo Audubon Society Christmas bird count. But Knox Farm State Park, which is not too far from me, they had a Christmas bird count as well, but it wasn't part of the official Audubon bird count. And I went on that hike with the naturalist, and we saw some pretty interesting birds on that hike. It was a dreary, kind of cloudy, cold, windy day, but we did see a pileated woodpecker in the woods. We saw quite a few other birds as well, but that was the highlight for me, the pileated. I was looking for the barred owl that's a resident there, but couldn't find it. So anyhow, lots of birding going on for me the past couple of weeks, which is always a fun thing for me to do. And that's why I decided that in this episode, I wanted to talk about birds. And not just birds in general. I have one of my favorites. One of my favorite birds in the wintertime. One of my favorite winter birds is the snow bunting. Now, the snow bunting, for those of you who like the scientific names of things so that you can look them up or maybe kind of take it apart and figure out where the name came from. The snow bunting's Latin name is Plectrophoenix nivalis. Now, like I said, they're one of my favorite wintertime birds, and I think part of it is the challenge of trying to find them. When we were on the Christmas bird count, I was always scanning the fields. Whenever I saw an open field, I'd get out my binoculars and I'd scan it because they're really hard to see. They're usually kind of crouched down in the field, and they blend in so well, which is another reason why I like them, is they're a very striking looking bird, very colorful, very beautiful. And they are one of my favorite birds to see in the winter because of those colors. They actually have a striking black and white plumage. Now, another reason why they're one of my favorites is they thrive in the harsh, snowy environments. I mean, just their ability to survive in these cold, harsh environments. And you may think, well, Western New York, I know it does get cold here. We do get some bad weather now and then. It's not like everyone thinks. Ever since the bad snowstorms we've had, everyone thinks, oh, Western New York, they have snow 24/7. Yeah, it's like year-round. Always. Snow, snow, snow. No, it's not that bad. We do get a lot of snow at times, but not as bad as where the snow bunting likes to spend their summers. Yeah, they're up in the Arctic regions. They're built for that harsh environment. So I think those are the reasons why the snow bunting is probably my favorite, if not one of my favorite, winter birds. The challenge of trying to find them, first of all, and they're not easy to find. I'll talk about how to find them, where to look for them at the end of the podcast, but also because of their striking black and white plumage, and of course their ability to thrive, handle these cold, snowy environments. So those of you who are not familiar with the snow bunting, let me describe them. They're a little bird. They're actually, I should say, medium-sized songbird. They're slightly larger than sparrows. Their coloration, like I was saying, very striking coloration. But that's in their winter plumage when I see them. They actually have different plumages. They change seasonally, very distinctly change. So in the breeding season, so in the summertime, that's when they're up in the Arctic regions, way up north. So in the summer, during breeding, the males are mostly white with black backs, black wingtips, and parts of the tail also have some black in it. The females are very similar to the males. They have the white and mostly white with the black, but they have more brown and black streaking on the head and back, whereas the male is just black. So the females have more brown in them. And then when we see them down in the southern regions, now if you're down in Florida, forget it. You're not going to get to see snow buntings. Yeah, they will come down into New York, maybe sometimes a little bit further south, but they're not going way south. So in southern Canada, northern U.S., you're going to see them in their winter plumage, their non-breeding plumage. Now, during that time, both sexes have a rusty brown. The markings are on the head and the backs, and they're mostly rusty brown. That provides camouflage in the winter fields. Are you getting a hint as to where these guys are living? Yeah, in the fields. That's where I'm always looking. That's where I always see them. There's some other habitats too, and we'll talk about that in a little while as well. But this provides them camouflage in the wintertime. So they've got the white, but they have the rusty brown markings on their heads and backs. And the male and female look very similar in the wintertime. Now, if you remember, I've talked about this in the past, with most birds, the females are very dull colored. And that's because they're in the nest trying to hide from danger. They don't want the predators finding the babies in the nest or the eggs in the nest. The males are brightly colored to attract the females, and that's with most songbirds, not all. The same thing goes for the snow buntings. The winter plumage is when they're not breeding, so the male and female look very much the same. But during breeding season, there is a difference in the coloration. Now, although breeding and non-breeding snow buntings look quite different, the change from non-breeding to breeding plumage isn't caused by growing a new set of feathers. A lot of birds will go through what we call a molt between breeding and non-breeding seasons, whether you're going into breeding or you're coming out. The birds will molt. You don't want to be a male songbird flying around. Bright colors all year long, especially in the wintertime. You're going to be spotted immediately by predators, and you're basically going to be food for that predator. So you need to get out of your breeding plumage right after breeding season. So if you see, goldfinch is a good example. The male goldfinch, bright yellow, bright black, very deep black going throughout the goldfinch. So these bright colors attract the female. But as soon as they're done mating, the breeding's done, they need to go back to those dull colors so that they can hide better. So the same thing is going on with the snow bunting. they don't go through this molt to change their colors. It's the weirdest thing. Instead, they change from the brownish to the pure white. And this happens when the males actually rub their bellies and heads on the snow. That wears down the feathers. The brown feather tips are worn off, revealing that bright white feature down below. So the brown is actually hiding the white. It's covering it up. So they'll rub, and basically they're wearing down their feathers to reveal that white. So it's not a molt they're going through like most other songbirds. It's kind of interesting with these species. Now, the last thing I want to describe is the bill. Their bills are typically yellow with black tips, but the males have an entirely black bill during the breeding season. So during non-breeding season, both male and female, yellow beaks, black tips. During breeding season, the males have a black bill. So very striking birds. Not a lot of color to them. Black and white, plain and simple, but very rich black, very white. And when you see them in our area in the non-breeding plumage, they are still very striking with that brown, that rusty brown going throughout the body. I remember seeing them many years ago. A couple of experiences I've had with them. First of all, I have seen them during Christmas bird counts out in the field, but my closest experience many years ago, I had a sliding glass door on my bedroom. I was walking by that door the one time, and I saw this little bird sitting in a snowbank from the snow I piled off of the patio outside of that door. And it was a little bit snowy, and sitting there on top of that little mound of snow, staring in my window like, hey, I want to come in there where it's warm. I doubt that's what he was thinking, but well, I don't know, maybe. It was a snow bunting in the brownish red coloration and the bright white belly. It was absolutely beautiful. I actually did have my camera ready, and I did get some pictures of it. And that was probably my closest experience with seeing a snow bunting. Otherwise, I usually see them out in the field quite a distance away. Now, where are they found? Habitats. Well, first of all, the breeding. Like I said, they're an Arctic species. They are made for breeding up in the high Arctic regions of North America, Europe, and Asia. They like to be in rocky tundra habitats, so not in the woods. They actually like to be out in the open in the fields, and they find a rocky area and they make their nests among the rocks. It provides them with some protection, but also they like to blend in with the snow. Remember, they're pretty much all white in the breeding season, so they can blend in with the snow and they can hide their nests quite well. Now, the wintering grounds, that's more south. So they migrate in the winter to the southern areas where it's easier to find food. And I'll talk about food in a little while. They migrate down to basically southern Canada and the northern United States. Now, sometimes they do travel a little further. It depends on how harsh a winter is going on in these parts of the United States or Canada, and they will go a little bit further, but usually it's northern U.S., like Pennsylvania, New York, my region, but hardly ever further south than that. Remember, they still have that white plumage in the wintertime, so they don't want to go in non-snowy areas because then they can be seen very easily by predators. Not a big bird, not a lot of protection for them. Now, they like to inhabit mostly open fields, but they can also be found in shorelines, areas with weedy vegetation. They don't like being in the forest. They don't like to be in the woods. They prefer being in open regions. Now, they are very social birds. They like to form large flocks. Now, not during breeding season. During breeding season, of course, most birds like to be pretty solitary. They don't want other birds or animals disturbing them, so they like to be alone during breeding season. But non-breeding season, very social. I usually see large flocks of them, especially during winter. I mean, during the summer when they're not breeding up in the breeding grounds, they will form flocks, but you mostly see the really large flocks when they're in their winter regions. That's when you'll see them in the big flocks. Now, the interesting thing is, they actually will go into what we call a mixed breed flock. So you get other birds, other species of birds, I should say, actually joining them. The larger the group, the more protection you have from predators. So that's why they form these large groups in the wintertime. And sometimes you'll see them hanging out. If you see these large flocks, you'll see them with horned larks or longspurs. They will hang out with the snow buntings in these mixed breed flocks. Now, you may wonder what they're eating, especially in wintertime. Well, they are primarily ground foragers. They're feeding on seeds, insects, and sometimes they'll even eat fruits, not a big part of their diet. And in the wintertime, you'll often see them out in these fields searching for the seeds. If you see a farm field and they hay it or they're cutting down whatever they're growing there, I mean, it's, a lot of the plant stays behind. I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the plant stays behind on the ground. You get a lot of seeds from the plant being disturbed. And the snow buntings know that. So they hang out in these fields and they'll rummage through the snow trying to find those seeds under the snow. So that's what they're eating in the winter, mostly seeds. But in the summertime, they include the insects and, like I said, sometimes fruit. Now, they have a very distinctive flight pattern. If you ever see them fly, it almost looks like they're very disorganized when they're flying in their flock. Some people actually describe it as a tumbling or a fluttering pattern with flashes of black and white, of course, as they're flying. So it's kind of interesting to see, but it almost looks like they're very disorganized. And you think they're flying into each other, bumping into it, but they're really not. They are organized in their flight, but it's a very strange looking tumbling-like flight when they're flying in these flocks. So let's talk briefly about their nesting and reproduction. Nesting, brr, way up in the Arctic. Yeah, they're way up in the Arctic tundra. They nest in rock crevices, as I mentioned earlier, usually under boulders, or in some other sheltered location. If there's bushes around that are protecting that area, they will build their nest there. They don't want to build out in the open. I mean, it's pretty nasty snowy weather. They'll wake up in the morning and be covered in 2 feet of snow. No, they are looking for these nice rock crevices. They'll try to go on the non-windy side under boulders or any other sheltered location that they can find. Now, the females lay anywhere between 4 to 6 bluish-white colored eggs with little brown speckles on them. Incubation usually lasts about 2 weeks. If you're not familiar with that term, incubation is basically keeping the eggs warm, sitting on them, keeping them warm until they hatch. This is primarily done by the female. The male does not sit on the eggs. Some species, the males will. They will have what we call a brood patch. A brood patch is a bare spot on the belly of the bird. So if you have a bird in your hand, we do this during bird banding, and we blow on the belly. If it parts, the feathers part to the sides, and you see a big bare spot of flesh, of skin, That's a brood patch. That's that they can get their belly, their skin, right against those eggs to keep it warm. Now, with most species of songbirds, it's the females who get the brood patch, and they're the ones who incubate the eggs. But we always have to be careful when we're bird banding. We're trying to tell whether they're a breeding bird, whether it's male or female. Some species of birds, the males will do the incubation as well, and they will have a brood patch. But with the snow bunting, it's the females doing the incubation. Okay, so that's what incubation is. They usually will incubate for about 2 weeks before the eggs hatch. Now, after they've hatched, both parents will take care of the babies. Both of them will feed the nestlings. So mom and dad will take turns going out to gather food, bring the food back to the nest, feed the nestlings. They will fledge in about 2 weeks. So total time from when the eggs are laid to the time where they leave the nest is about 1 month. So 4 weeks total. 2 weeks of incubation and 2 weeks of basically being nestling and being fed in the nest, being cared for by the parents, and then they fledge the nest, fly off to be on their own. Now, the male snow buntings head to their high Arctic breeding grounds when the ground is still covered in snow, and the temperatures sometimes can dip down to negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't seem like a good time to arrive to me, but the males need to get there early so that they can be sure to get one of the limited nesting spots. Remember, you're looking for these rock crevices or boulders, someplace out of the elements that you can build a nice nest. There isn't a whole lot up there, and there's a lot of these birds looking for the nest. So they have to get up there early to make sure they get a good nesting site so that they can assure that they're going to have a good nesting. Now, the females will join them probably about 3 to 4 weeks later. And that's about when things are starting to warm up in the Arctic. So it's not that negative 22 degrees. No, it's much warmer then, so that they can actually start to lay their eggs and start to nest. Now, as I mentioned, the snow bunting will place the nest deep in the cracks or cavities in rocks, basically hiding it away from the elements. It also will hide it away from the predators. Yeah, it's fairly secure from predators, but the rocks are cold. So they need to make a thick nest lining out of feathers, fur that they find around. This helps to keep the eggs and the nestlings warm, and it also helps to keep the female warm while she's laying on there. The female must stay on the nest for most of the incubation period, because if she gets off for any long amount of time, it's still cold up in the Arctic. I mean, it's warmer during the summer, but it's still cold enough that it could freeze the eggs rather quickly. So she has to stay on for most of the time. Now, because she can't leave the nest, the male is the one who takes care of her. He's usually out and gathering food, brings it back to her several times each hour, so that she can stay on the nest and keep those eggs warm. Now, the snow bunting, they have great adaptations for these cold climates. They have a lot of cold tolerance. They're well adapted to the Arctic regions, and even when they come down to the northern parts of the U.S. in the winter and it's cold, they are made for it. They're built for it. They have a very thick, dense plumage. I actually read some studies that they've done about which is better insulation, fur or feathers. I mean, most people think feathers are not as good as fur, but it's the other way around. Fur is actually less effective than feathers. Feathers have barbules on them, so they actually link together, blocking out any wind from coming in. If you've ever had a down jacket or a down comforter and it's so warm? That's because down is basically the fluffy feathers from a goose or a duck. So feathers do make better insulation than fur. So thick feathers, very dense plumage is going to provide very excellent insulation. Another way that they can survive these cold climates is during the nighttime. They will actually reduce their body temperatures. That way they conserve energy so that they can use that energy during the daytime to stay warm. And of course, they have excellent camouflage. Think about their colors. No bright colors. Yeah, they don't have bright reds, yellows, not like some of the songbirds we see in our region. Or you go down South America into the rainforest, boy, some of those birds are real colorful. Very bright colors. But remember where this guy is. Yeah, the snow bunting is up in the Arctic. They're always in a snowy region. That's why they're white. So they have very effective camouflage in both summer and winter environments. In the winter, they're hanging out in fields. If we don't get a lot of snowfall around here, the farm fields still have some of the corn stalks laying in the field or sticking up a little bit. And they are what color? Kind of a yellowish brown, kind of like the snow bunting's back. So they get this brownish, this reddish brown color to help them blend in with those fields in the winter. But the main color, still white to blend in with the snow. So how is the snow bunting doing? Well, snow buntings are very common, so there's not any real concern, although some populations are starting to show declines in their numbers. The main reason, you can probably guess because I say this about a lot of species that I talk about, habitat loss and climate change are potential threats to their populations. It's warming up. As it warms, what are we losing? We're losing their camouflage. Yeah, the white. We're losing snow. They're losing those areas that they like to be in because they're made to be in those areas. So that's why some populations have started to show declines. Now, I want to close with some kind of interesting facts about snow buntings. First of all, snow buntings are one of the northernmost songbirds in the world. You get into the really cold areas of the world, you're not going to find many songbirds. But the snow bunting is built for those cold climates. That's why they are one of the northernmost songbirds in the world. Now, I want to break down that scientific name I told you at the beginning. Plectrophenax nivalis. Now, plectro means, well, it comes from the Greek word, and it means a claw-like tool, referring to their long hind claw. So if you look at the feet of the snow bunting, the back toe has a long claw on it. At least it looks like a claw. Now, phoenix is Greek for imposter, as their claw isn't a true tool. It's not really a claw. Now, nivalis is Latin for snowy. I think you can guess why they chose that word. Yeah, it describes their coloration and habitat. So the scientific names comes from an imposter-like claw-like tool and snowy. Now, I did promise you that I would tell you at the end of the episode where to find these guys. Now that I get you excited about them and you want to go out and start searching for snow buntings, well, I always recommend looking on eBird, looking on any birding website that will tell you of where sightings have been. eBird's great for that. You can search eBird and put in snow buntings and see where they've been spotted in your area, what fields they've been spotted in. Now, they don't stick around for very long in one field. They like to move. It's a survival technique. But at least you'll know the area they've been spotted in. Now, I always see them mostly in open fields. So when I'm driving down the road, if there's an old farmer's field, I shouldn't say an old farmer's field, a farmer's field, one that's been hayed though. So you don't have a crop actually growing in it. The crop has already been harvested, but you can tell that there's like stalks sticking up in the field. That's where I usually see the snow buntings. Remember, they're after the seeds. So it's just a mowed lawn, you're probably not going to find snow buntings. But if you have a farmer's field covered in snow, get out the binoculars. Remember, they like to hunch down close to the ground. It's part of their protection, part of their camouflage. So get out your binoculars, look for any kind of movement. I don't usually see them until they start moving. That's like, oh, they're there. But get those good binoculars out. Watch the open fields. And like I said, if you go along the shore, if you have a lake near you or maybe a large river, go along the shore where there aren't a lot of trees and also look there. That's the best way to find them. But to know what region, at least go on eBird and check. See where they have been spotted. Maybe they haven't even been seen in your county. Maybe in the next county over. Then check over there. If you live down south, anywhere further south than Pennsylvania, don't even bother. You're probably not going to spot them there. You're going to have to come up north. Now, if you want to see them in their breeding plumage, you're going to have to spend the summer up in the Arctic regions. And even then, not easy to spot them because you have to know where to look, what region, what areas of the Arctic to look in. So that's the best way to find them. I usually find them on the Christmas bird count. This year I didn't for the first time in a while. I'm in a new area on my count circle, so I'm still learning my region and where they're going to be spotted. I'm trying to find all the different farmers' fields. So I hopefully will find them next year. But that's where you're going to find them. Look for the fields, pull over, make sure you're in a safe area, get your binoculars out. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening today and learning about the snow buntings. Be certain to share the podcast with your nature-loving friends so that they too can learn more about the natural world around them. It's always nice to learn with a group. Yeah, if you'd like to support the podcast, visit the show notes for a link to my Ko-Fi page. A portion of all support will be used to plant trees. The rest helps to pay to keep the podcast going. You can also support the podcast by purchasing awesome items at my online merch store. You can also support the podcast by purchasing awesome items at my online merch store. And if you like to journal your wanderings through nature, be certain to purchase a Nature Wanderer nature journal. All the links are in the show notes. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Stop back next week for another episode of the Nature Wanderer podcast. Have a great one. And keep exploring the nature around you. Did you know that plastic is made with oil, a fossil fuel that pollutes the environment? And did you know that only about 15% of all plastic is recycled into new products? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could live our lives without plastic so that we could stop harming the planet? Well, there's a company that wants to help you do just that. Life Without Plastic sells products that will reduce or eliminate your dependence on plastic. They have a large selection from toothbrushes to food storage containers to drinking straws, all plastic free. And it's reasonably priced. So what are you waiting for? Check out all these great plastic-free products and help save the planet. Just click on the link in the show notes to find out more and to start your journey to being plastic-free.